Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see so many people here. We're here to talk about the San José Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower, which is a blueprint for sustainable hydropower's contribution to climate change, climate targets. We're being live streamed. For those people watching on live stream, we've got an audience of about 10,000 in front of us. For you guys, there's an audience of about 1 million watching us right here. Thank you. So, we have a very distinguished panel. I'm delighted to introduce Malcolm Turnbull, who I think you will all have heard of and know. Of course, very distinguished career in journalism, in finance and investing, in law, and then you became Prime Minister or something. But since then, he's had a much more successful, the pinnacle of his career is becoming a board director of the International Hydropower Association, and also chair of the Green Hydrogen Organisation. Thank you, Malcolm, for joining us. We have Minister Doris Gilbache. I've been practicing that. Minister of Tourism, Industry and Innovation in Iceland. Iceland's got a very interesting story to tell us on interesting geology and, of course, lots of hydropower. And we have Marianne Kleiberg from the Regional Director of Europe for the Nature Conservancy. And, of course, these have been our conscience as we take forward these efforts, and she's going to keep us on the straight and narrow as we discuss our commitments towards sustainable hydropower. So, before I explain a little bit about what the San José Declaration is, so we can get just a sense of whether the audience is as brilliant as the panel, I'm going to give you a quick quiz question. How big in the energy mix do you think hydropower is at present? I'm going to give you 3 options. First option, those people who think it's 20% or less of the energy mix. Hold your horses, I'll give you the options first. Those who think it's between 20 and 50, and those who think it's more than half. So, first of all, those people who think it's less than 20% of the renewable energy mix. A few of you. Those of you who think it's between 20 and 50%. A few there. And those of you who think it's more than 50%. Those people who answered either of the final 2 questions, you're right. Because it's around half at the moment. It was a few years ago, certainly more than half. Of course, we've got more wind and solar coming onto the system, and so the percentage is dropping. And I'm not saying this is a beauty contest, right? We want more wind and we want more solar, but we do also need hydropower. And I wanted to sort of state the size of the challenge that we are facing as we go into this. And of course, this story of sustainable hydropower began 21 years ago, really, when there was a World Commission on Dams, and it said, basically, that hydropower can do a lot better job when it comes to sustainability. That's 21 years ago. And I'm going to say something which you would not expect to hear from a CEO of the International Hydropower Association. I would be quite happy if there were no more dams ever built. I'm not a fan particularly of dams as such, but we are going to need more dams. And we are going to need, more broadly, more hydropower. That's a fact, and I'll tell you why. There are 3 reasons. First of all, it's just the baseload requirement. go to somewhere like Africa, they only tapped 10% of their hydropower capacity, and we know very well the needs for energy, for renewable, for clean and green energy in that continent. Are we going to turn around to them and say, no, you can't have what's already in your countries? I was talking with the minister from Tajikistan yesterday. 3% of their hydropower potential tap. They could be a major energy superpower within Central Asia. Are we going to stop that? So there's the whole base load. We need the energy. Secondly, we need the backup. We're going to have a whole lot more wind coming online, a whole lot more solar. So where are we going to get energy when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? We need to find it from somewhere. And it's going to be this backup. And it basically gives us three choices. Either we'll face a whole load of blackouts, or we'll fall back on fossil fuels, or we have to go to hydropower because it's a proven long-duration energy storage technology. And then there's a third area, which is we're going to have to do a lot more water management. Climate change is going to see a lot more floods, a lot more droughts, a lot of strain on agriculture with needs for irrigation. So we're going to be managing our water. We're going to be managing our rivers. If we're going to be doing that by building dams, let's power them. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you back also and look at the 78% of dams around which aren't powered at all at the moment? Let's retrofit them. Pretty low impact kind of work. So IEA, International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol was standing exactly here an hour ago, and he was saying we're going to need to double hydropower capacity in the next 30 years. We've got to build the same in the next 30 years as we built in the previous 120. That's the scale of the challenge as they see it. That's them throwing down the challenge in order to meet net zero by 2050. And where we stand as International Hydropower Association is saying, well, that must be done sustainably. I am not here, and I've got no interest in representing hydropower companies or projects that are not interested in doing this sustainably. It has to be done sustainably. We have to learn the lessons of the World Commission on Dams, and we have to set a new agenda, a new blueprint. So this is where eventually I'm getting onto the San José Declaration. The San José Declaration at its heart has two key elements, two key sentences. Firstly, sustainable hydropower is a clean, green, modern and affordable solution to climate change. And secondly, going forward, the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower. So, it says those two key documents, and it's got three really important new messages that I want the audience here to understand. Firstly, this concept of sustainability is underpinned by a demonstrable test, an assessment, the Hydropower Sustainability Standard. Now, the Hydropower Sustainability Standard is not, as some people have written, an industry standard. We did not write this standard. It was done in a multi-stakeholder group designed by the NC and other conservation NGOs, social NGOs. It had governments, it had banks. It's not a surprise that it is aligned with the World Bank and IFC requirements and the regional development banks. It's not a surprise it's aligned with green bond requirements. It is the same setup. So this multi-stakeholder group, they designed it, it's independently assessed. I promise you, this is not industry marking its own homework, it's not governments marking its own homeworks, it is out there. That's the test that we say going forward needs to happen for new development. Secondly, we made a commitment, no new hydropower development in World Heritage sites. And indeed, any in protected areas have a duty of care, so again, have to meet good practice or better in terms of that standard, assessment against that standard. And thirdly, we have this element of look at whether you can refurbish, look at whether you can retrofit, and if not, if there aren't net benefit uses for a dam, there should be a consideration of whether that be decommissioned. A review. It's not going to be the case in all cases, there are lots of questions within that, but there should be a review. So these are some of the ways that we think that the San Jose Declaration really moves the needle on from where we were 21 years ago. Now, that's enough from me. Thank you for tolerating that little background, but I think it's important to give us some context.
It wasn't too bad.
It wasn't too bad. Malcolm, he's one of my bosses, so that's okay. Malcolm, then, I will turn to you and get my revenge.
That's the problem with giving cheek.
Yeah, no, you won't heckle again. Look, you've been, I think it's fair to say, described as a sort of pro-market.
Yeah, yes.
Pro-market politician.
A capitalist, yes.
A capitalist, okay, your words. And yet, when you were Prime Minister, you, on behalf of the national government, made a big intervention to build Snowy Hydro 2.0. Do you want to explain a bit about how that
notwithstanding my capitalist background, I can say that while I was Prime Minister, I nationalised the means of production. See, not even the left do that anymore. But the Snowy Hydro scheme is a big hydro scheme in Australia and New South Wales, in our mountains. Australia is a big, flat, dry country relative to other continents. So, we don't have the same hydro opportunities that others do, but Snowy Hydro scheme's this heroic piece of engineering built in the 50s and 60s. And the big idea that I had in the beginning of 2017 was to drive for pumped hydro. I'm very passionate about that. I think it's very important to make renewables reliable. I think it's also very important because it has much less environmental impact because you don't need as big a dam and you're basically using the water again and again. You essentially just need 2 reservoirs and a difference in elevation. And when the variable renewable energy is in abundance, when the sun's shining in the middle of the day, pump the water up the hill and then run it downhill when you need it. So Snowy Hydro 2.0 is being built. It's got about 370 gigawatt hours of storage. It'll be able to, in other words, it'll be able to generate 2,000 megawatts for 7.5 days without repumping, which is much more than you need, naturally. So it will no doubt become Snowy 3.0 and 4.0 so that you just build, more capacity, more penstocks, more turbines and so forth. But ultimately, I think this is one of the most critical priorities. We have to get on with it. Everything has to be sustainable, but pumped storage is one of the ways, probably it's that and green hydrogen, to be honest, one of the ways where you can get long duration storage, which is absolutely critical. So that's how I fulfilled the socialist objective, notwithstanding being from the centre right of politics.
Well, it is an amazing story because it does sort of throw down the gauntlet to other politicians, whatever their ideological colour.
These two are. I think their batteries are dead.
This kind of project is probably going to need government intervention. Why did you come to that conclusion?
As it happened, the Snowy Hydro belonged to New South Wales and Victoria and the Commonwealth, the national government. Obviously, to take it to the second stage, you were going to need a lot of investment. So I said to the two state governments, come with us and invest pari passu, or we'll take you out. And they, as a joke in Australian politics, is never get between a state premier and a bag of money, and they naturally said, thanks very much, we'll take the cash. So that's how it happened. But look, I think while governments can do these things, we do have to develop, and the IHA has done a lot of work on this, we do have to have the market rules, the incentives to encourage the private sector to build long duration storage. You know, it's the right planning approach is first determine how much long duration storage you need, and then say, all right, let's set the rules to provide the incentives to do so. And they'll differ in every market, but ultimately, you know, it's something we're going to need. It's just, you know, I always say the problem with energy policy is that all too often it's governed by ideology and idiocy. What you need is engineering and economics, and if you follow that, then you'll get the answer right.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you. Let me turn to Minister Thordis, very appropriately dressed in green against the blue background.
Iceland, wool and green.
Yes, you were thinking ahead. Great. Look, I mean, Iceland, I think everybody knows, is, I always think of it as like the sort of geologically spotty teenager of the world. It's, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on right now in geological terms. You've got a lot of geothermal, you've got a lot of hydro. You've been doing this for years. Why? What does a standard and a San José Declaration on sustainability mean for you?
Yeah, you're right. Iceland has for long relied on hydropower. Around 75% of our production comes from hydropower, and then 25% from geothermal. And still we haven't utilized wind much, but we have plenty of it, so that's definitely something that we could also do. And sustainability is simply the key issue when it comes to utilization on our renewable energy resources. And therefore we believe that the San José Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower is of great importance, and we fully support the declaration. And it outlines a new progressive vision for how sustainable hydropower can, in a responsible manner, be utilized to play its best role in the clean energy transition, which we, like you said, need to undertake. In Iceland we have, in our recent energy policy, which is actually the first time that we've finished an energy policy, finished the work, which may be a bit strange for a country that has such a long history on that regard, but there we set ourselves the target that Iceland will be independent from fossil fuels by the year 2050. And my personal opinion is that we should definitely say we are going to be the first nation in the world to be fully independent from fossil fuel, because we can. Yeah. We already heat our houses with geothermal, but we import fossil fuels, of course, for cars and industry, and that's where we're heading. And if we agree with the target of elimination of fossil fuel, then we simply need to answer the question, where is the clean, sustainable energy is going to come from? If we stop using fossil fuel, we need something else. And we have there hydropower, geothermal, wind and solar. We are not using solar much because we need the sun, so, but wind is something where we can definitely utilize. So there we need to answer the question, where is it going to come from? And then, of course, we need to do the work properly. And of course, it is always sensitive, and it's always a political debate in Iceland. And it is very important to find that balance. And when you have people often coming from totally different direction to the same place, it is difficult. And that's why San José Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower is very, very important.
Super. Well, we're delighted to have you as part of it, and thanks also for hosting this. Look, can I turn to Marianne now from the Nature Conservancy? As I said, here is our conscience, making sure that we, notwithstanding your address, Minister, we're not greenwashing this subject. This is, and I'm not interested in being part of something that is greenwashing. But look, you've been pushing it for a long time. We've been having some pretty exciting and heated debates within industry about how far we could and should go. What's your reaction? Have we come far enough? What do you say?
Thank you for calling me the voice of nature. I'm pleased to be your conscience and give that voice. And I actually do want to applaud you for the San José Declaration. I think that the industry has made great strides towards sustainability. I would particularly like to call out some of the avoiding hydropower build-outs in World Heritage Site as a significant step. I know that our environmental sector has been pushing for that for many, many years. Has it gone far enough? Maybe the voice of conscience would say, could we include a broader category of protected areas? Going forward, we know that the CBD COP, the Biodiversity COP, will have proposals to protect 30% of the land, freshwater and oceans. So there will be a debate about hydropower in that sense and really about the right siting of that hydropower going forward. But I do think that in your opening words, Eddie, as well, you did say that you're not in favor of building big new dams, right? And I think our perspective is that we need to look at the options of all renewables. So no country should rely on only one source of renewable. And also congratulations to Iceland for your commitment. And coming from a capitalist background, Malcolm Turnbull, you might say, if you think about investing in a financial portfolio, you want to diversify your portfolio to minimize your risk. So if a country only depends on hydro, we don't believe it should continue to build out hydro. Why don't you look at complementing with solar and wind and other types of energy? We know climate change is going to change precipitation. We know that some countries, I know very well, Southeastern Europe, for instance, Albania, they rely 90%, almost 100% on hydropower. And they're seeing a decline in precipitation. So at one point, they may not have enough water to maintain actually the electricity generation that they need. So we would like to see, if we are doing more hydropower, can we look at a master planning approach? So we would of course say it's nature first, do we need hydro? Can you retrofit old power plants to make them more efficient and more environmentally friendly? We do know, of course, that there will be a need for new hydropower. We all agree on that. And not all areas have enough sun, like you do in Iceland, or enough wind. So if we're going to build out more, how can we do it in the most sustainable way? And we believe that having energy planning is one way to go. So we would like to encourage governments and industry to work together to say, what should an energy plan look like for the country? It could be at the country level, at a regional level, or a basin level, so that you can assess all of the renewable assets that you have and eventually come up with something that is low cost, low carbon, and low conflict with the local communities and other sectors that are often opposing some of these energies.
I agree.
Just to say, yes, I think there's a strong agreement all around. We obviously need to work together to go hand in hand with governments and with good leadership from within governments and say, this is a planning issue. Let's plan. There's a big problem, of course, with hydropower is it takes a long time to build. Perhaps it should take a lot less time. Perhaps there are things we can do about streamlining and permitting, but essentially it is a long-term planning issue, and that has to be addressed. Before I get sacked, because people have interpreted me for saying I'm against big dams, let me say, I would like to, nothing better for a world where there's no infrastructure, right? That's not the point I was making.
It's worse.
No, we need it. We need it. I've made it worse, haven't I? Yeah. No, my point is, big or small, to me that's not so much the question. New or old, not so much the question. On river, off river, not so much the question. My question only is sustainable or not. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Eddie, can I just say on the question of drought that Marion raised, this is where the combination of wind and solar and pumped storage is very helpful, because you don't need to let water out of your system to generate electricity. You'll let it out of your system for run of river, for environmental purposes, for irrigation purposes, but in terms of energy generation, your primary energy source becomes your wind and solar. I mean, this is if you go this way, and you use the hydro as either an actual pumped storage or a virtual storage. And so it enables you to be more thrifty with your use of water. And I mean, this is a big issue for us in Australia. I mean, we are, as one of our great poets said, the land of droughts and flooding rains. And she didn't add, and terrible bushfires as well, probably didn't scan. But that's the nature of our climate.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And that's also the reason I mentioned wind, because in Iceland we have, like I said, 75% of our production comes from hydropower, and we don't have almost any wind yet. And we're isolated. We don't have any interconnector as well. So it's definitely also for us to be able to control our hydropower a lot better, to just get the right balance.
What about green hydrogen? Are you?
Yeah, that's something that we are looking into, and we are now working on with all kinds of companies and stakeholders regarding green hydrogen, and that's something that we, both for Iceland domestically, for our trucks, for our fishing industry, where we're not going to use electricity in all of the transit, and then also we need to look into the possibilities simply to export hydrogen. Because we have a long history, we have experience, and we have knowledge, which is something that we can definitely export. And the human capital is limitless and not a resource like the others. But we also need to look into the possibilities to simply export hydrogen and all these power-to-X possibilities and the green, because again, if the world is gonna at some point be independent from fossil fuel, we need many different products instead, and the green hydrogen is definitely one of them.
Yeah, not many countries have the luxury of the surplus, but there's no need for waste. Is the message. Marianne, you want to come in?
Yes, I wanted to say that the Australian Iceland examples, they illustrate that there is not one size fits all, right?
Exactly.
And that we have to be location specific. So in some cases there might be more sun, some cases more wind, and it's easier to think about hydropower or renewable energy as that one big bucket that all countries need to adjust and adapt to. But I think what you're saying is we need to look at each specific location. And again, coming from the voice of nature, obviously one of our main concerns are some of the world's largest free-flowing rivers. Think about the Amazon, the Irrawaddy, think about the Congo Basin. So there are areas that we care particularly about that we would not want to see dammed up. There are free-flowing rivers. There are fewer and fewer of them in the world. So again, it's being site-specific. So there are some places that might be suitable, but others that we believe from a nature perspective as well as a drought perspective of others should really strive to develop other types of energy sources.
Can I illustrate something about rivers? This might be interesting. So, the Murray River, which is the longest river in Australia, and where it and its tributaries are where you get most of the irrigation, is about 2,500 kilometres in river length from the place called Albury, which is really the last the foothills of the Snowy Mountains. There's a dam there. 2,500 kilometres river length. It's about 175 metres difference in elevation. So it's flatter than that table. And so these rivers, most of the Australian rivers, developed ecosystems which meant that when it flooded far and wide, and so you had all sorts of ecosystems that depended on that regular flooding. Lazy, meandering rivers. So Europeans settle in Australia, seize Australia from the original inhabitants, and then start trying to turn the rivers into English or European rivers and build dams and irrigation and so forth. And of course, that means that that flood natural ecosystem is deprived of water. Anyway, I made some steps to redress that back in 2007 with the big Water Act and so forth. But, it's hard because a hotter, drier climate, less water, more people wanting it. But again, you get back, if you're innovative, you say, well, you know what? We don't need as much water in the dam for hydroelectricity as we thought we did, because we'll generate our electricity in the first instance with variable renewables, and we'll just use the dam from an energy point of view as a battery. And so you can then release more water into the environment. So, it's a really beautiful combination. Variable renewables and the flexibility of pumped storage.
Yeah,
so it's good for the environment.
It's a beautiful model. But storage isn't there, right? I mean, in the theory you've set out is right.
Yeah.
But you have described the whole question of green storage and green energy security as the ignored crisis within the crisis.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do to
you've got awareness. You've got to start building, and also, I mean, the other big factor I think is green hydrogen. So if you, place like Australia, the amount of electricity that's being generated in the middle of the day from solar sends electricity prices right into the basement, negative, which is killing the coal-fired thermal generators, which is, I have limited sympathy for them, I have to say, because we have to stop burning coal and gas. But if you start taking that you've got to take that surplus electricity and either use it to pump water uphill or make green hydrogen, and that's how you can store it. So the crisis is so severe, we've got to tick all of the boxes. But I think hydro has a big part to play in it, and it's on. This is the funny thing. Hydroelectricity generates so much of the world's renewable electricity, right? We know that. Green hydrogen, which I'm also very enthusiastic about, is only very nascent, yet it has 100 times the public profile and publicity as hydro has. Yeah. And so we've got to get more balance and must make everything work. And I mean, as you're saying, Minister, in your country, you combine wind, your onshore wind resources are so incredible. And probably your citizens would prefer it to be less windy from time to time.
Definitely.
But Iceland could just become this enormous powerhouse for the world. So, I described Tasmania as the battery of the nation, using similar ideas. What about Iceland? You've got thermal, which we don't have much of, if any, in Australia.
Yeah. And that's why, like I mentioned, of course it is a sensitive debate always, and it will continue to be. But, I really don't feel sorry for Icelanders, because all of these issues.
Well, they've got such a good government for a start.
Well, no, because of all of these challenges the world is facing, we in Iceland have a lot of opportunities just to increase the quality of life, and we can definitely be part of the solution. And that's our homework. We need to decide where do we want to put ourselves in that new puzzle, and where do we want to take some space, because we definitely have a lot of things to offer. And we don't even need to switch. We don't use gas. We don't use coal. We don't have any strong lobbyism that's going to be difficult to fight. We don't have, we won't see a lot of unemployment because of some necessary changes. These are all challenges most other countries are facing when they acknowledge the change we need to step into, the new world that we all agree that we need to transfer into. So for Iceland, it's Of course we can't. Nobody wants to utilize everything we can possibly utilize because it's also. I mean, there are other. That's what sustainability means. It both needs to be sustainable economically, environmentally, and socially. So you need to find the balance there. But for Iceland, we are very fortunate.
I mean, I agree. You're in a particularly unique situation. But as I was saying about Tajikistan, 3% it's using at the moment. Africa using 10% of its potential. This is just in hydropower. Russia is using 19%. I mean, there is enormous opportunity, and this ability to turn renewables into green hydrogen means that we can worry less about overcapacity. Can I turn to you, Marianne, because that all takes us to IEA's prediction or roadmap saying you're going to need to double hydropower, hopefully sustainable hydropower. Do you think that's possible without, whilst keeping true to sustainability principles?
Yeah. I think one question is it necessary? And then the second one, is it feasible? I don't know that we necessarily believe that it is necessary. I think to double, that with other renewable energy sources and new technologies, we probably will need to lower that amount. I would also say that if we were to double, speaking from nature again, we would see detrimental impacts on free-flowing rivers around the world. I don't think that it's compatible to double without having that impact on rivers. And as that voice of nature, I mean, fresh water is very often one of the forgotten ecosystems. We talk about land, we talk about oceans. Actually, when it comes to loss of biodiversity, we've lost 84% of freshwater populations since 1970. It's actually one of the most drastic declines of biodiversity in any ecosystem in the world. So for us, the doubling, one, not necessarily agree that it is needed if you complement with other energy sources. And then second, is it feasible without detrimental impact on nature? Probably not. So I would look forward to working more closely with the International Hydropower Association and the members to figure out that right pathway going forward.
Great. We're on for that. We want to do some mapping with you. We'll talk about that separately. But let me open this up now for questions. I see you, but just any questions that people have. Oh, thank you. You're going to be taking. We've got about 5 minutes. Yes, please, sir.
I just want you to be aware that in parallel to San José Declaration, we, as 352 organizations of civil society around the world, issued Declaration for Rivers for Climate, calling for alternatives for hydropower, because we believe that refurbishing existing hydropower for more efficient use in energy systems is a valid task, but expanding it is a damn threat, not only for nature, but for many, many local communities that normally suffer, even in developed countries, when hydropower is developed under certain rules, and really suffer in developing countries where these rules are not that established. Therefore, I would like to give to Honorable Minister our declaration, which we distribute to the governments and energy companies, with the hope to be heard that no more hydropower on new rivers should be allowed, and the money should go into better energy systems, and money should go into better integration of existing hydropower in new energy systems, because right now, for example, in my best beloved Russia, where I am from, and where I have to warn you that Russian government declared me a foreign agent 2 weeks ago, and mandatory, I need to make this announcement. They declared me for preventing dams preventing building dams on free-flowing rivers. And I want you to make aware that this declaration is signed by 69 organizations for 69 countries to prevent this disaster from continuing and switch the energy development on really sustainable ways compatible with human rights values. Thank you.
Thank you. And I mean that this is a really good example of the challenge that we have here. That this is about sustainability. You can't hear me? Oh. just to say thank you. This is exactly what we're talking about here, to try and make sure we can come to a consistent understanding of what sustainable hydropower actually means. Obviously, we have a slightly different view of where the opportunities are, but this is the forum for having that discussion. Can I encourage questions as well, rather than just statements? Thanks.
I have to go.
Hello.
One with Will.
Hi, I'm Mark Lambertese from the Nature
We'll be done.
Conservancy. Prime Minister, you mentioned two critical E's when thinking about energy departments or energy planning: engineering and economics. I would offer to you in the future to consider 3 E's: engineering, economics, and the environment. So in the energy space, to build in the environmental consideration.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
Done deal.
We talk about pumped hydro, and we had the question about doubling of hydropower. I wonder if you or IHA together have looked at the global potential for pumped hydro. How much of that doubling could we get from pumped hydro? It's my impression
Enormous.
that really, because I think
staggering,
it's fairly site-specific in terms of elevation.
Okay, I can.
How hopeful are you in that space?
All right, if you give me the mic.
No, you can be heard.
Oh, I can be heard. I've got a mic. Okay, that's a really good question. So I'll just stretch my legs. The Australian National University was commissioned, some years ago, and when I was PM, to do a big study on the availability of pumped hydro sites. It's an atlas. It was headed by Professor Andrew Blakers. And they found, I think it's 60,000 sites around the world.
600,000.
Is it that? Anyway, a lot, a huge number. Because you see, you don't need to be on a river. That's the good news. I mean, you basically need a reservoir on top of the hill and a reservoir at the bottom. Obviously, you've got to have water. The dams, the pumped hydro systems, for example, that are being built in Israel to support, their reliability, involve only a volume of 3 million cubic metres of water, which is a lot of water, more than your bathtub, but it's not Sydney Harbour, or let alone some huge dam. So I think the point is they can be much smaller, and they don't have to be on rivers, and that's what I find really exciting. And so Andy Blakers mapped this and said, right, we're going to screen out of the map. I think the one done in Australia is probably the more precise one. Map out, obviously, World Heritage, national parks, and so it's an opportunity to use, basically, land where you're essentially building what would be a large farm dam. So I think there's quite a bit starting to get going in Australia. Snowy hydro itself is unusual because it's linking to existing dams. There's not many cases like that, but they're huge. And there's 700 metres difference in elevation. But I think the off-river pumped hydro is exactly how we can have lots more hydro, but without any of the environmental problems that you have with estuaries, rivers, freshwater ecosystems.
I am conscious that we've come to the end of our time. Is there any is this a really short, snappy one? You promise. Good.
There's another man with
Hi, Chris Wilkie with Waterkeeper Alliance, and I just wanted to ask you, you were just talking about pumped hydro. For the current expansion plans of the hydropower industry, how much of it is pumped hydro versus traditional dams? And what are you doing about the impacts of methane from traditional dams in the short term, in the first 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, we've actually, oh, they can, okay. We've actually got reports on both of those. Can we pick you up afterwards? And Alex, our head of policy as well, because we want to share those reports that look into some of that. I'm going to have to call an end because I'm getting into trouble from the organisers and the panelists. It's been, roller coaster. Thank you very much. That was great to have your attention and interest in this. Thank you very much, panelists.
Thank you. Hooray. Hooray for the panelists.
Thank you both. It's been a real pleasure.